In recent weeks, Joe Biden has been pushing his disastrous economic agenda called Bidenomics. But what is Bidenomics? Well, here's a preview.
Let's be clear about what Bidenomics really is. I mean, the economic plans out of this administration have been very clear. Spending, regulation, and higher taxes. That's what Bidenomics is.
And thanks to Joe Biden's war on American energy, in 2022, Americans paid the highest gas prices ever, over $5 a gallon. In fact, Joe Biden has set a lot of records, like 40-year record high inflation, like 26 months of collapsing real wages, the longest streak on record. And thanks to Bidenomics, hardworking Americans now owe nearly $1 trillion in credit card debt, an all-time record high.
The cost of housing, shelter up 5.5% in 1 year. Electricity up 13.5%. Natural gas up almost 40%. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner is more expensive. Food up 10.5%.
Bidenomics means 1/3 of Gen Z and millennials have absolutely zero savings. Nothing. But it wasn't always like this. In fact, Joe Biden inherited a booming, robust economy from President Donald J. Trump.
Remember, Mr. Biden inherited a 6.5% growth rate with roughly 1.5% inflation from his predecessor, Donald Trump. Essentially, Biden's big government socialism has turned a booming economy into a bust.
Under President Trump, wages were up, unemployment hit historic lows, and on his last day in office, gasoline was only $2.39 a gallon. President Trump created 7 million new jobs, triple the projections, leading to the lowest unemployment rate in nearly 50 years. The Trump economy lifted 7 million people off of food stamps and achieved a record-high stock market and record 401ks. Under President Trump, unemployment rates for African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, Native Americans, women, veterans, individuals with disabilities, and those without a high school diploma all reached record lows.
And the other candidates can only claim they know how to run a national economy. No one knows if they do or not. Trump is a proven, well, look who I'm telling, Trump is a proven winner on the economy.
Viktor Orban, a couple of news items, if you don't mind. Viktor Orban said that you told him that you want to cut funding for Ukraine as soon as you get there. Where's that effect? He said that in an interview.
Yeah.
Is he correct? Is that the plan?
Well, first of all, he's a fantastic guy, and he's taken in no illegal immigrants. He runs his country very tough, and a lot of people don't like it. But he runs it very tough, and it does very well, and there's no crime. They don't have, when you look at what's happening in our country, where there's crime on every street corner and murder, death all over the place, and it's going to get a lot worse because of the migrants coming in. You know, millions and millions of people coming out of prisons and coming out of mental institutions, and they're all coming in to the United States. We had a great time. We had dinner. We get along very well. But I told him, what I told him is Europe is spending a tiny fraction of what we're spending. And the European nations, as a combination, they should be paying the same because, you know, their economy is approximately the same size. If you add them all up, their economy is very close to our economy. Plus, they're in a lot more danger than we are. We have a thing called an ocean between us, right? And they don't. So they're spending, they have $100 billion, probably more than that, less spending on Ukraine than we do. They should be spending money. I had the same thing with NATO. They weren't spending on NATO. I said, you got to spend on NATO. And they did. Once I said it, I said, I won't protect you. I would not protect you if you're not spending, if you're not paid up. But Europe is about $100 billion less in spending in giving money to Ukraine. And I said, that's something that really has to be taken care of. It's not fair to us.
So he was okay in saying what he said?
Well, he was okay. I mean, he gave a very short statement, a sort of statement. I told him, I think it's very unfair to America. It's very unfair to the United States taxpayer. When we're spending all of the money or a majority of the money, Europe should be spending. I call it, you have to equalize. Equalize. They have to equalize what we spent, and they should do that. And they will do that, just like they did with NATO. They will do that if somebody is in there to tell them. But do you think Biden's calling them, saying you have to equalize? I don't think he's ever said that.
One more thing from today's news, TikTok, the Republicans just voted to, Republicans and Democrats just voted to ban it. You don't think they should ban it right now?
Well, I didn't say anything other than you have to look at Facebook. Facebook is the enemy of the people. They did those lockboxes. They spent $500 million. Do you know, if you spent more than $5,600 or whatever the number is, if you spent $100 more, they put you in prison for campaign violations, right? Zuckerberg, or Zuckerbucks, whatever you want to call him, is spending, the number is crazy. He's spending $500 million in the last election, and nothing happens to him. And that money's being passed all over the place, especially on the lockboxes, or so-called lockboxes, because they're not lockboxes. I call them open boxes. And I think that something has to be done with Facebook. And one thing I will say, I don't want Facebook to get bigger because I think Facebook is an equal threat. And that includes with China, because if China wants to know anything about what Facebook knows, they're going to give them the information.
Mr. President, I'm very curious about what it's like for you, your life. You know, no one's gone through what you've gone through. Nobody in human history has really, and I know you have supporters, friends, family. They say it's lonely at the top. And I'm actually curious, is it ever lonely for you? I mean, no one can fully relate to what you've been through and what you're going through. Are you ever lonely?
So over the years, I love history. I study history. And I was always told that Andrew Jackson, as a president, was treated the absolute worst. He was just really lambasted. And I heard Abraham Lincoln was second, but he was in a thing called the Civil War, so you can understand that. But Andrew Jackson was really, really treated badly. In fact, his wife died during the process. I mean, a lot of people say she died because of the way they were treated. I mean, she was heartbroken and broken in so many other ways. And I heard that for years. And I look now, even last night I was saying it, I said, I don't care, Andrew Jackson or anybody else, nobody has, when you think of the fake things, nobody's been treated like Trump in terms of badly. Russia, Ukraine, everything was a scam. And it literally starts the new one. As you win one, you start the other. Impeachment hoax number one, impeachment hoax number two, all hoaxes and scams. And I said, if they ever devoted their time to making America great again, it would be a lot easier. Some people say, sir, how do you get out of bed in the morning? It's a war. We're fighting some very bad people, some very evil people. And it's a war. And it's a war that we're winning. You know, when I looked at the numbers last night, we had tremendous numbers. You had tremendous. Other candidates are, as you know, other candidates are left, even if they're no longer on, if they quit, if they gave up, or whatever form of leaving they wanted to take. Those numbers were incredible numbers, and the numbers of people that voted were incredible numbers. There's never been spirit, in my opinion, for an election of an American president like there is right now. And I think you add on the fact that they love my policies, they like me, they have to like me, they're not going to vote otherwise, but they see how bad, how pathetic Biden's been. He's the worst president in the history of our country. He's corrupt, he's incompetent, he's weaponized the justice system to go after his political opponent, which has never been done before. And he's the worst president we've ever had. He's not respected at all in foreign. Look, you wouldn't have Russia attacking Ukraine. You wouldn't have Israel being attacked. Iran was broke when I was president. They were broke because of me. Let's say they were broke. And they didn't have the money to give to Hamas or Hezbollah. All of these things, you wouldn't have inflation because it was caused by energy. All of these things were things that were very preventable, not preventable by him. And the problem we have 7 months to go, a little more than 7 months to go. That's an eternity when you have incompetent people running the government.
The cases against you in different ways are disintegrating. You see what's going on with Fannie, and Jack Smith keeps on losing on these emotions. Yeah. These cases were designed to destroy you.
Yes.
And they've helped you. And some of us actually, we see, I know my audience and me too, we see that you're protected, maybe even by the hand of God. Has that ever crossed your mind? I mean, the idea that these indictments could have been a benefit to you politically, it's almost it was inconceivable a year ago. Now look at where you are.
Well, I've watched people over the years, politicians get indicted, and the first thing they do is go to the microphone and say, I'll be leaving office now, and I will fight for my name and my reputation, and I'll be going back home to my family. You know, they leave for a lot of different reasons. but nobody's ever been hit like me. And there's never been anything like this. Look, my numbers are highest. Nobody's ever seen numbers like this. I believe that if this didn't happen, perhaps they miscalculated, and perhaps they haven't. Because don't forget, it's not over yet. But there is some kind of a protective force, because you look at what I've been hit with. These are horrible people. These are corrupt. Jack Smith. I call him deranged Jack Smith. This guy is out to murder. Here's Joe Biden with 50 times the number of documents, classified stuff. He took it all for a 50-year period. And don't forget, they can blame his mental health. And I agree with them on his mental health. His mental health is terrible. But they can blame his mental health. But 20 years ago, and 10 years ago, and 30 years ago, and 40 and 50 years ago, he didn't have, let's say, a mental health problem like they talk about today. So they release him from liability. And you're talking about many, many times the documents over many years. And he didn't have the Presidential Records Act. He didn't have it, which totally protects me, in my opinion, totally protects me. I was dealing with them. We were dealing fine. We weren't. And then all of a sudden they raided this house. They raided Mar-a-Lago. These are corrupt people. But they release Biden. What Biden did, he wasn't protected by the presidential right because he wasn't president. He took him when he was a senator. Dick Durbin got up and said, if he did that, that's a real bad thing. That's as bad as it gets. Dick Durbin's on their side. And I just remember when he heard about that, he took a lot of classified documents as a senator. Dick Durbin couldn't believe it. So when you look at it, there's something going on, because they're going after me viciously. Then all of a sudden it comes out that Biden took 10 times the number of documents that I did. And I took them very legally, and I wasn't hiding them. We had boxes on the front of and a lot of those boxes had clothing, and we're moving out, okay? Unfortunately, we're moving out of the White House. And because we're moving out of the White House, our country's going to hell. But we weren't hiding anything. He was. And then you see him with his Corvette. Nobody ever mentions the one, though, that's the worst, is he had him in Chinatown. And those were boxes that were used. If you take a look at those boxes there was a lot of activity in those boxes. They show pictures of them. These were boxes that were used. In Mar-a-Lago, we had the Secret Service. We had all sorts of security. We had everything. And what he did was far more egregious. I mean, what I did, I had protection. I had the right to do it, in my opinion, and in my lawyer's opinion, and everything else. But when you see that the way they released him, and they say, we're going to release him, it was egregious what he did. But by the way, they released Hillary Clinton. She hammered her phones. She used all sorts of acid testing and everything else. They call it bleach pit, but it's essentially acid that will destroy everything, within 10 miles. I mean, what she did was unbelievable. Nothing happens to her. Nothing happens to Bill Clinton. He took it out in his socks. It was the famous socks case, which he actually ended up winning. So when I look at this, Greg, I say, there's got to be something. It was very interesting when they were going after me viciously, raiding my house, everything else, because Jack Smith is an animal. He's a total animal. He's deranged. He really is. He's a deranged person. The other gentleman who went after Biden, it was a weird kind of a conclusion, because he said, he's competent to be president, but he's not competent to stand trial. That's sort of a strange thing. I don't think people are going to buy that very much, because certainly it'll be used during the campaign.
Very curious. You're a tough person, obviously, but you have experienced loss like anybody else.
Yeah.
You lost your brother over the past couple of years, your sister, your late wife, Ivana. How do you grieve? Because you were right back at work. You had to be. And it's hard to conceive somebody like you shedding tears. And I'm curious did it happen then? Has it happened?
So I don't like to do it. When you lose somebody, it's very tough. I lost my mother-in-law very recently. She was a great woman. She was very beautiful woman, inside and out. And she died. And I will tell you, it's a tough thing. I don't like to show that. I don't like to see it.
But you have.
A lot of people, sure you do. I mean, you do when you lose somebody that you really love. My sister, my brother, when you lose your parents. It's a very tough thing, and I find nothing wrong with it. But I don't like to do it in public. Now, I have to tell you something. Sometimes I don't think you can really help it, and that's okay too. I think that's okay too. But grieving is grieving. When you lose somebody that's very close, in many ways, if you don't grieve, perhaps you're not such a good person.
Hunter Biden is saying he's not going to go to the hearing he's been invited to. And look, you give him a hard time, and he deserves a hard time, but imagine you ran into Hunter Biden, say, here in Palm Beach for some reason, some crazy coincidence, and you weren't talking politics. I know that you know about addiction from your brother Fred.
Right,
You've spoken
right,
about
right.
that. Is there anything you would tell Hunter, because his dad apparently, the president, is worried about him relapsing? Any kind of advice or encouragement that somebody like you could give to Hunter Biden?
Well, I think what's happened is, they went after the president of the United States, and I guess Republicans went after them. And I think it's a very bad, the whole thing is very bad. There's never been anything like what's happening right now. They go after a political opponent. When I say they, I'm talking about Biden. He's going after his political opponent. I think that's made, and without even knowing it maybe, I think it's made Republicans very angry. The Hunter Biden stuff is bad, let's face it. And if you believe the laptop from hell, there's a lot of money that's been exchanged, and it's a lot of money and seems like a lot of proof. They're going to find out, and they certainly have found out, because, look, a lot of money has been exchanged, and from a lot of different countries, including China, and that's serious stuff. But I would just say to him, what do you say? What do you say? So many bad things have seemed to be happening. Now they blame the fact that he's got drug use, and one say they say, oh, he's done a wonderful job, and he was the smartest person I've ever met. This is the father saying it. And then in the other case, every time there's something wrong, he says, well, he's got a big problem with drugs or whatever the problem is. You got to just fight it out, I guess. There's nothing much you can say. He's being accused of some very bad things, but hopefully it all goes away. We have to get back to building our country again. We have to get back to, our country's a laughingstock all over the world. Our country has never been in a position. Now, Putin, as you know, is talking about nuclear weapons. He wants nuclear weapons. And we have a man that can't talk. He can't negotiate. He doesn't know he's alive. He gets up and makes a speech. The other day, he's screaming at everybody like a lunatic. And everybody said, oh, he made it. He made it. He made it through, barely. He made it through the speech, and he was all jacked up. And you just wonder what's going on. This is a very dangerous time for our country.
Two more quick things. I want to respect your time. In 2016, you did the opposite of what the political professionals would recommend, almost every turn, and you won. And that's amazing. That's a testament to you. But is there such a thing as overconfidence? I mean, you've been right a lot, but nobody's right all the time. Is there such a thing as overconfidence? Are you, at this point, tough to advise? Or, I know you got great advisors, but did you learn some negative lessons by being right when they were wrong? And you might think, well, I'm always right. They must always be wrong.
Well, they do have a hat on, and I don't produce it. Somebody else. Trump was right about everything. I mean, if you look at all of these many, many things, I've been right about everything. I've been right about immigration.
But the little things, tactics and things like that.
Look, I listen to a lot of very smart people. I listen to people that aren't so smart, and you find out they're not smart later on. Look, I've had people that are great working for me, but I've also had people where it was a mistake having them. One of the things, and I say this very, very strongly, believe it very strongly, I came to Washington. I wasn't like in the Washington establishment. It's an establishment. I was a New York person, and I didn't come here much. I was here, they say, the press says 17 times. I didn't know people like normally you would. And I put great people in, but I also put people that I made a mistake with. I made a mistake with some people I put in. Obviously, it wasn't a grave mistake because we had no wars. I got out of wars. I rebuilt the military. We defeated ISIS. All the different things we did, lowest taxes ever. We got the biggest tax cuts ever or the biggest regulation cuts ever. But nevertheless, I now know people. I now know, I believe Washington probably at the upper levels better than anybody. And I think I'm going to have some unbelievable people. And I have unbelievable people that want to be with us. I have, as per the first part of the interview, tremendous people, some of the most talented people. They want to come into this administration. So we'll see what happens.
We're wrapping up, but the general election is underway right now.
Yeah.
The other night I saw you, I guess it was Saturday night, you said, I reached my hand out to Democrats right now if you want to join us. And that was beautiful. But it was in the middle of a rally that the other side's not seeing, networks aren't carrying it, to reach out to them, to the people who've been lied to about you. How are you going to do that? And are you going to show another side to yourself or change anything?
So during my tenure, we had the most successful economy in history. And it's very interesting. I was called, all of a sudden, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, women, men, with diploma, without diploma. Everybody was doing great. And I was seeing real success. And I was being called by some very liberal or progressive, you want to use the term, they don't like liberal anymore, but I'll call them whatever it is, from some very liberal people, some people that you would never think would call, Greg, and they wanted to get together. The country was coming together, and success is going to bring the country together, and it should come together. But you have some very bad people politically on the other side. Some people, I actually think they hate the country. They hate the country.
There are some people who can't get past, I know this has been a thing for a long time, the tone. People delight in the tone. I like the straight talk, but some people forget the success. They're just horrified by, oh, he said a bad word, or he said this about you, used a nickname. Is there any way to get them, to get those people?
I think so. I do believe it's when we prove that we were right. We were right about things, and when we prove that we were right. Remember this. I came in, and before I ever started, I was under investigation. I don't mean this, I'm talking about before I even announced I was running for president. I was under investigation by these lunatics. And they were investigating me because they thought I might be running for office. I fired Comey very early. It was a good move. If I didn't, I might not be talking.
And you got investigated for it.
Yeah, well, I got investigated for it. By the way, I made the right move. That was a great move. That's getting rid of the deep state. But I got rid of him, got rid of a lot of other people. And we were doing really well. But these people, if I were really nice about things and soft, and let's talk about not using certain tone or certain words, probably I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have survived. I had to be tough. And then people say he's tough. But they put me under the gun from long before I got before I got elected. I was under a gun like nobody, and probably no other president in history.
Going back at them, you're going back at the deep state. You could lose the middle at the same time. Like, you're fighting for your life, you're fighting for the country, but they're alienated along the way. You're not anticipating any kind of shift in style, in approach, in I don't know, like Rocky Balboa was fighting Apollo Creed. He switched from right hand to left hand, something just to change the game.
I would like to say yes. I will always be nice. I will always be respectful. But when they hit you, you have to hit them back. And then people would say, oh, gee, Trump isn't a nice guy because I hit back hard. They say Trump isn't a nice person. But they do like my policy, and they do like the fact that I had the safest border in the history of our country. I had, we had statistics that nobody's ever seen. I had the greatest economy in the history of our country. I had the biggest tax cuts in the history of our country, the greatest regulation cuts in the history of our country, the best job numbers. We had things that nobody's ever done before. Rebuilt the military, created Space Force. Right to try, which is such a big deal. Right to try from the standpoint you could get medicine that won't come out for 5 or 6 years, but if it was working, we got that people that needed this, and in many cases it worked. We saved thousands of lives. I don't want to be phony. In a certain way, you could say, well, are you willing to really change and be a phony? I see it all the time where people are not being themselves. I have to fight back. These people, many of them are evil people. I think many of them are sick people. I talk about the danger we have from the outside, but I also talk about the danger from within. These people, many of them, they make up false stories like Russia hoax. That was a hoax. It took me 2 years to get rid of that thing. And then we were totally exonerated. It was a beautiful thing, but it took me 2 years. If I didn't fight that strong, and you know how corrupt it was, you cover it better than just about anybody, it was totally corrupt. And if I didn't fight that with power and strength, if I was going to be some kind of let's all get together, these are evil people, these are sick people, and they actually put our nation in a lot of danger, because when you do that stuff, you really are at danger with Russia or whoever it is. And there were many other things other than that. If I didn't fight tough, if I didn't fight nasty and do it the way that I have to do it. I wouldn't be interviewed right now unless you were doing maybe a story on real estate or something, and I'm sure that probably wouldn't happen. No, I have to do it. I have to do it strong. Many of these people, deranged Jack Smith. He's a deranged individual. He was told to do a number of me because they think that's the way Biden gets elected. This has never happened in this country before. If I was going to fight it in a nice way, I don't think I'd be successful.
Mr. President, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very much indeed. And good luck and congratulations.
Thank you. And great show. You have a great show.
Thank you, sir.